So, Bob, let's stop talking about the gory details of colonoscopies, which is, par for the course for our age, and let's answer some emails instead. What do you say?
Yeah, sure.
Middle tier patron and YouTube member, Kimmy from Utah, she says, I just started working at my first agency, and I'm feeling left out as a therapist. I'm feeling left out. There are less than 10 employees total between two locations. I am the youngest by more than a decade to everybody. There are also two main groups, or cliques, I think is what she's referring to. Mm-hmm. There is a group of divorced or separated women with older children, and another group of women who are remarried to women. I have been married happily for nearly a decade, and my oldest child is nearly 10. It's hard to come into a new agency and try to connect. How do you deal with feeling left out and isolated as an adult? Bob, what do you think?
Well, you could focus on what you have in common as opposed to what your differences are. You all are therapists, I presume, and maybe someone there has clinical interests that are similar to your own, or knows something that you want to learn about, in which case you got that to talk about. But, you don't have commonality around the other things. That's okay. You can relate to all kinds of people, but, in the areas where you overlap. So my guess is that.
Yeah.
Or at least that's what I would do.
Yeah. If these people are shutting you out, then it's going to be harder, obviously.
Yeah. Right.
But you're not saying that. It's weird. When I started working full-time at the university, I was also the youngest. I had Rebecca, and because she is around my age, very close to my age, and we had each other. But, most of the time, Rebecca and I weren't in the same meetings because she was art therapy. So I would often just kind of do my work and go home. And people would go to dinner together and socialize and go to each other's houses, and they either wouldn't invite me or I was busy with something else. And, that's okay. So there's that. The other thing is that when I first became a therapist, my very first job, I was very young and very insecure and was terrified, and I had that approach of just putting my head down. And it resulted in there was a number of bad things that conspired for this asshole supervisor to fire me. But
that guy.
But one of the factors was that I was very reserved, and apparently, according to him, people are interpreting that as me being hostile, which is just like, what?
Just silly.
Like a 25-year-old brand new intern, and I was the only intern too. At least I wasn't exposed to any other interns or something. Anyway, and so I was, and it wasn't like I didn't talk. I'm not like completely inept at responding to people, but I wasn't volunteering my thoughts and meetings and that kind of stuff,
As you consider that in retrospect here, would you say that it was a hostile place to try to work?
Yeah. Well, later I confronted him.
Yeah.
And he told me that. He said that the agency as a whole was going through like a huge amount of upheaval and drama and infighting. And I didn't know about it because I was only there for like 7 or 8 weeks or something anyway. So what did I know? But anyway, the second place I worked at, I decided to overcome that social anxiety and because my career depended on it.
Uh-huh.
And so what I did is I leaned into just being a little extroverted and maybe gregarious.
That's what I did.
And so what I remember doing specifically is, and I was in an almost identical situation to you. What's your name? Kimmy from Utah. In that the second internship I had was a very small agency of about 10 therapists, 10 employees, and it was in a renovated one-story little house in Federal Way. And I would go into, and the bedrooms were the therapy offices.
Yeah, of course.
And so I would go into the therapy offices when the doors were open and the therapists weren't working, and I would just chat.
That's what
I would just walk in,
Yep.
and I would just chat. And a lot of people did this, but I would just find something to chat about.
Yep.
And there were some people that were easier to chat to than others.
Right.
And I might also ask them clinical questions.
Yeah.
And say, like, what do you think about this case? You know, other therapists, I've never met another therapist that doesn't get really engaged with that kind of questioning, particularly if someone thinks to ask them for advice. You know, like as a therapist, you're like, oh, well, let me help you with that. So, yeah, that's what I would do.
Yeah, me too.
Because if you let it go on too long, it could feel weirder and weirder.
Right.
And you don't want to dread going to work. And having friends, you know, connections. Now, like I said, the way you framed it, there's a possibility that they're shutting you out, but that doesn't seem likely. You know, you say that there's a group of divorced women with older children, and so you're like, I'm happily married, and my kid is 9 years old. So, you know, I don't see any reason why you couldn't relate to each other.
Yeah.
And then you also say there's another group of women who are remarried to women. Again, I can't see any reason why you wouldn't be able to connect.
Yeah.
So next email, anonymous middle tier patron from Las Vegas. They say, Dear Dr. Kirk and Bob, first of all, I love you both, and maybe that's weird, but I mean it.
Thank you.
Well, we love you too. I have been in therapy for 5 years for childhood trauma, and I'm almost 50. I am only just now forming a connection with myself. I have a wonderful therapist who I guess is about 15 years younger and who I love deeply. Mm-hmm. I have always been very aware of boundaries with my therapist and the therapeutic nature of their relationship. I feel the urge to talk about the feelings I experience toward them, but I can't. It seems impossible. Oh. So just chiming in. So it sounds like they're saying, I have an urge to say, I love you deeply, or I'm very appreciative of you. I think about you a lot, or whatever.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
But they're saying they can't, and it feels impossible. What do you think about that?
I think it's fantastic that it's coming up. It is your attachment insecurity right there in front of you, and you find yourself, you know, avoiding speaking plainly about to somebody whom you formed a really lovely, it sounds like a really lovely attachment with. And isn't it wonderful that you notice that you want to speak to them about how you feel? Mm-hmm. Yeah. I think you should do it and take the risk.
What's the benefit?
The benefit is a corrective experience of transparency and being accepted as you are.
Yeah, right. It's vulnerable.
Yeah.
And to have that received safely, but also very much appreciated and deeply felt, can be a profound experience, repeated over time. Going on with the email. I would love to hear more about specifically Bob's experience in therapy. How do you feel? Well, thanks, anonymous military patient, for shutting me out. Just chiming in here. Just joking.
Oh, shit. I missed.
Anyway, how do you feel about your attachment to your therapist? Do you express your feelings to your therapist? And if so, how? How does your therapist respond? Does it bring up grief about... So just starting one question.
Okay.
Do you express your feelings to your therapist?
Yes.
And how?
Plainly.
Like what might you say?
I might say, I love you. I might say, I'm really appreciative that, you know, for our time. Or I might say, in a scared moment, please don't leave me. Which, of course, you know, he's very reassuring. He's not going to leave me. Sometimes I can be haughty because my therapist is younger than me too, and sometimes I want to kill him, right? And I say that to him. Of course, it was funny when I told him that. He's like, "Yeah, I already knew that, Bob." And it was really cool about being plain about that. Is it took a lot of the feeling away, so I don't find myself trapped in haughtiness anymore. I think the problem with it wasn't that I felt haughty; it was that I felt ashamed about how I felt. Mm. So it's not easy. It's easier. I still resist being plain about how I feel towards him. And, you know, I have therapy tomorrow morning, so now I know what I'm going to do. Thank you.
And then they ask, does it bring up grief about what you were deprived of and other things that were perpetrated on you?
Yeah, it does. It brings up grief. Yeah. It's funny because I don't have a frame of reference for what normal people get, like, the kinds of, but I do notice that there's tremendous sadness in me and grieving around the abuse. So, yeah, it does. And I can feel that grieving when I am candid with him in the way that we're already talking about here, about letting him know how I feel about him and letting him know how much I need him.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's just tragedy that even when you're having a corrective experience and you're finally getting your needs met, it comes with this major asterisk, which is, well, now that I am opening myself up to this wonderfulness, I am also exposing myself to the acute knowledge that I was deprived of this.
Yeah.
Which, of course, intellectually I know, but now I'm feeling,
Right.
It's like when you finally get a glass of water after 2 days of not having any water,
Yeah.
it kind of hurts going down.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. But better that than nothing else, right?
Yeah, agreed.
And the grief is good to feel.
Yeah.
You deserve to feel that grief because why wouldn't you?
Right.
All right, next email. Okay, this next email is from patron and YouTube member Shelby from Denver. She says, "Hi, Dr. Kirk and Bob. Do you think it's okay to feel the best when you're alone? I am married to a wonderful man and have 2 beautiful babies, so I'm not completely alone, but I have almost no desire to have friends outside my family. I don't want friends. I love being at home. I feel so at peace and happy on my own, just being in my own mind. Is this normal or healthy? For reference, I am on the autism spectrum. Thank you." Bob, what do you think?
You're already answering your own question. This is what feels good to you. This is what is fulfilling and satisfying to you. The only thing that came to mind is at some point your kids are going to launch and, then you might have to make some kind of shift so that your social needs are met. But, man, if you're happy, right on. Good. God bless you. That's fantastic.
Yeah, that's what I would say. The only thing I would add is that sometimes things are the lesser of 2 evils in your mind, and it feels great in contrast to having outside relationships, but it's because of something that went on for you in your past or some belief that you have that is preventing you from actually enjoying outside relationships. It's sort of like if someone goes through sexual abuse or assault and they engage in sexual behavior or, relationships,
right?
They experience a lot of distress and a lot of discomfort. And after a while they conclude, I guess I don't like sex, but that may or may not be true.
Oh, right.
It's unknown.
Yeah.
They might actually be asexual, but it's possible that with recovery, then they actually will be able to feel comfortable enough to have their sexuality realized.
Yeah.
So whether you're on the autism spectrum or not, Shelby, there could be that would just be the thing to look into.
Right.
But absolutely, you hear people talk and they'll say like, that's not healthy. And, there's a wide variety of getting your needs met.
Yeah.
And if you're getting your needs met, then
right
don't let anybody say otherwise because they don't know what they're talking about. Let's take a break. When we get back, more emails. What do you say?
Yeah.
All right, let's do an OPP. Bob.
Okay.
These people became patrons in about the middle of 2021. We have M from Australia, Mara from BE. Belgium, probably. Yeah. Sarah from Belgium, Professor Snarky from Ontario, Maggie from Quebec, Leanne from Quebec, Maria from, there's a lot of Canadians. Maria, I think I organized this by people not in the States, I guess. Maria from Windsor, Ontario, Liz from Hamilton, Ontario, Jean from Toronto, a lot of people from Ontario, Vera from Berlin, Sarah from a place I can't pronounce in Germany, Christina from Estonia, EE, is that Ireland?
EE is
EE country code. Country code is Estonia.
Estonia.
Is that what I said?
You did say that first, yeah.
Ireland is...
Isn't it IR?
I feel like it's not.
Oh.
Ireland country code. IE.
IE. Ireland is IE. Well, is Northern Ireland a different country code?
Probably.
Yeah, okay.
So we have Emma from London, Olivia from Glasgow, G from Great Britain, Suzanne from Idaho, Sarah from Bologna, Italy. No, Idaho. I guess I was like Bali. Bali, Idaho? ID is Indonesia, of course.
Oh.
So Suzanne from Indonesia. And those are the people that became patrons in mid-2021 who are not from the United States. Thank you so much for becoming a patron all the way back then. That's great. You got Belgium, Canada, Deutschland, Estonia, Great Britain, Indonesia, and Italy. I wonder if I don't usually hear Indonesia. I wonder if we don't have that many people from Indonesia.
World's largest democracy.
Oh. So going on with an email here, patron Aaron from Australia, she says, "Hi, Kirk and Bob. Could you please discuss how you would gauge whether your client is ready for inner child work? I have been seeing my therapist for about 8 months now with 2 or 3 sessions a month. Last week, we had what felt like a major breakthrough in tracing the root to one of my triggers. She has suggested exploring inner child work based on the success of that session. On one hand, I feel silly trying to connect and talk to myself as a child.
Oh.
It doesn't feel real. Is it something you just have to practice?" Just chiming in here, Bob. What do you think?
Yeah, you have to practice. It's okay if it doesn't feel real. It's okay if it feels awkward or embarrassing or whatever. And you'll know if it's helpful to you by engaging in it for some length of time. But if it's going to feel weird, just let it feel weird. So what?
Yeah. Also, what I'll say is it really depends on what she means by inner child work, because for some people, that will mean that you talk to your quote-unquote inner child as if it were outside of you. But I don't do that. I mean, I have done it that way, empty chair work, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
But I will talk about inner children, and that's a way of helping people to connect with a side of themselves without the defenses. Typically the metaphor of the inner child, like if you ask someone, like they're telling you about something happened at work, and you say, "How do you feel about it?" And they're like, "I don't know, whatever." And then I might say, "Well, what does your inner child feel?" And they're like, "Well, I guess my inner child probably feels hurt." So
right on.
What does that mean? Does that mean the inner child is feeling hurt? I don't know, whatever you want to say. But it does help facilitate people to feel the permission or something to be able to express feelings that adults will typically deny. That's because wonderful. It feels childish or weak to have the feelings.
That's wonderful.
Going on with the email. Secondly, I feel like I am scared to go down this path. Anytime I start to delve into it, it literally feels like a neural pathway switch, and I hear a voice that says, no, 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 no.
Yeah.
It's like I've been redirected. I feel like that's a sign that this is what I need in order to heal. But I don't know if I am ready and what I should tell my therapist at our next session. Do you have any thoughts or advice? Bob, what do you think?
What does ready mean? Like, how do you define ready? That sounds, just based on what I'm hearing in this email, that just sounds like fear. Like there is no ready. So, definitely talk about it in your therapy. And you might embark anyways. Readiness aside.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I want to use Yoda's line.
Yeah.
There is no try. There is only do. And it's the same. There is no ready. There is do or do not.
Yeah.
And the vast majority of things, and you're saying this, Aaron, that it feels like there's a resistance there inside of me, but that probably means I should be doing it.
Right.
And that is a good guide to follow. However, if you have PTSD,
Right.
then you should not be going there, and there should be great care. So it really hinges on if you actually have actual PTSD, not just trauma, but actual current PTSD, meaning that you have great terror triggers, and when you go to your inner child or thinking about your childhood, that distress, that terror is physiologically triggered for you, that adrenaline response.
That's just a question of triage, though, don't you think? Like, learn PTSD, how to manage symptoms or how to reduce them or how to become acquainted or some version of exposure to ready oneself for the other thing.
Yeah. What do you mean by triage, though?
First things first.
Okay, yeah, right. Yeah, exactly. So, because that feeling of no
Yeah.
could be PTSD. You
Right.
know? It's just, I didn't hear enough detail to know.
Right,
otherwise.
right. We could be dead wrong with this response.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Patron Catherine, she says, Dear Kirk and Bob, in a recent episode, you discussed whether it's ever okay to tell a client that they're attractive. I'd love to hear your thoughts on providing reassurance to clients more generally. In my own experience, well, I'm just trying to remember what we said. Do you remember what we said?
Yeah, we talked about have you ever told one of your clients that that they're attractive? And we, in general, couldn't see any reason to say it, though I've said it, but I've said it in a sort of a generic way, like, oh, I think any so-and-so would be lucky to have you. Any man or any woman would be lucky to have you. These are, some of your qualities or whatever. But I don't say to somebody, you're attractive, or I find you attractive. That would just be creepy and weird and irrelevant.
Right. Right. I think there's two layers here. One is if there's not a risk of harming a client, creeping him out by saying you're attractive or I'm attracted to you,
right,
then it's a less risky layer where you're just saying, well, especially if the client is asking for that reassurance and say they have a distortion about their looks, you can say, I have to tell you, you're distorted about your looks. It doesn't make any sense. You see yourself in a way that I'm quite sure no one sees you, and including me.
That's good feedback.
So that's telling someone, at the very least, they're not unattractive.
Right.
So that's one layer. The other layer is to say to someone that they're attractive with the potential implication that you, as a therapist, consider the client be attractive. And the old school, or there was old school wisdom that still persists till today, that there's a version of therapy that is viable, that you're just brutally honest. And I think that some therapists can pull it off and have it be not harmful. But generally speaking, I hear too many stories about therapists that reveal it to clients and it goes horribly wrong.
Yeah.
It ruins their relationship. The therapist is saying it out of a place of lack of processing themselves.
Yeah.
And as I walk myself through it, I'm thinking, if that happened to me, I was just trying to imagine a justification, because, if I'm attracted to a client, as we all need to do, it's well researched, it's been discussed and written about for decades, that I need to go to my supervisor or a colleague or my therapist. I need to really explore what's going on.
Right.
And be very aware of it and not get rid of it necessarily, but get a handle on it. Mm-hmm. Maybe my marriage isn't going well. Maybe this client reminds me of someone. Maybe I'm avoiding something. Maybe I haven't had sex in a while or something. I don't know. Maybe the client is inducing something in me. There's a lot of things other than just I'm attracted to someone and it's just this innocent thing,
Sure. Yeah.
And once I work all that out, once I figure that out, or at least have a good conceptualization, I have a path forward, and I'm still attracted to the client, I'm trying to think if there's any justification for telling the client, unless the therapist cannot control the urge of revealing it, having signals, and it's crazy making to the client, because the client might even be asking things. But I would say, if you as a therapist cannot fucking keep it in your pants, energy-wise, then I don't know what to say.
You got to work on that, man.
Yeah.
That's not going to work.
Get a hold of yourself.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? it's normal to be attracted. It might be normal to have that urge, but double the therapy or something.
Yeah.
Or fix your personal life or something.
Right.
So that's what we would say. But what patron Catherine is saying is, well, what about just reassuring clients more generally? So going on, as some background, this is something that comes up frequently with my therapist. Basically, I want reassurance. I want to be told I'm a good person. Mm-hmm. I want to be told I'm a good parent. I want to be told that I'm not broken. My therapist has told me plenty of things that are supportive and reassuring in some sense, such as that he enjoys working with me, that he finds it easy to like me, that he doesn't see me as broken or a terrible person. But he is clear to phrase things in terms of his own experience, not a blanket statement like, you are such a good person. I'll admit, as I have to my therapist, that this is hard for me. So just chiming in here, thoughts on that, Bob?
There's something tantalizing happening. I want my therapist to say the thing in a particular kind of way. I mean, they're saying something in the neighborhood, but for some reason, I want them to say this other thing. That might be interesting to just learn about. Like, what's the function here for me? What am I trying to accomplish? I'm not saying there's anything nefarious, nothing evil, nothing, but just some energy inside you that compels you to kind of have this kind of, longing or impulse, or I don't know what else to call it. Yeah. Mm-hmm. So I'm kind of interested to know.
Yeah. Yeah. It's hard to know where your therapist is coming from, but I would say your therapist is doing a similar thing that I would do. Although if a client really wanted me to say, just tell me I'm a good person, I might do that.
Yeah.
A lot of therapists wouldn't, and I think there's some definite wisdom to that because it is a shortcut that might not be helpful to the client. The other thing to think about is that it sounds like for you, Catherine, you're having very good transference that is corrective for you and it's working. And wherever he draws the line, you're probably going to want more. And some therapists will, just figure out a comfortable place to draw the line, and then no matter what, you just draw it there.
Yeah.
And you do everything you can within that line, And you just know as a therapist that no matter where you draw the line, there's going to be some frustration. So, I've done that before, particularly with people who have transference like this. Whereas with other clients, I might be a little bit more loose because I'm not predicting that the client is going to be transferring that way. So
then you get to learn about what is the disappointment or frustration that's coming up. What is that?
Yeah. Your therapist could also be thinking, we're on the path for you to conclude that you are a good person. Mm-hmm. So I don't see any point in trying to race to the end of the race. It's just
like
not
that.
possible.
I like that.
I've thought that before as well. Going on, a marriage and family therapist that my husband and I saw for a while was the complete opposite. He would regularly say to us, "You guys are fantastic parents." He would often say to me, "You are not broken." As much as I liked hearing him say these things, perhaps not surprisingly, these statements made no difference in how I saw myself. Maybe that says everything right there.
Yeah.
Bob, what do you think?
I think that's a great insight. Nice noticing.
Yeah. It also could be that you just didn't have the transference with that therapist.
Yeah, could be.
Otherwise. But yeah, going on. What's your take on providing reassurance to clients? Is that something that you do, Bob?
Yes. I definitely provide reassurance to clients. I didn't used to back when I was young and foolish, and I had a mentor, mixed. Anyways, he's like, "Bob, provide reassurance." No, I wasn't doing psychotherapy back then. I was a case manager at the mental health clinic down in Renton Way, and but we'd have clients in crisis, and he's like, definitely provide reassurance. Things like, it's going to be okay. You're going to find your way through it. That sort of thing to help people who are in pain and need a bit of hope. And so I still do that. I hope I don't do it at the exclusion of somebody's growth. Like I wouldn't want to hamper their growth by providing reassurance, but I do still do it.
Yeah, it should also be said that we're explicitly trained for good reasons, that impulses of reassurance need to be heavily questioned by ourselves. When we have an urge or we're being requested to reassure a client and compliment a client, we have to be skeptical as to why we're doing that. Because it's common for bad therapists or lay people who are anxious about what they're being told. Like a common example that we use in training would be, I'm just trying to think of like an easy one to demonstrate this. Like a client comes to you, a client comes to me and says, I'm depressed. I can't get out of bed. I've been, just really down for 5 years now. I just feel worthless. I, as a listener, it's natural for me to worry about the client and wish that things were different. Also, I'm being tasked with fixing this problem. So I'm worried about my own competence or failure or something. And I might say something like, I'm trying to be reasonable, because I could, like an exaggerated version would be like, everything will be okay. Just try, or something like that. Or a more kind of reasonable, reassuring mistake would be to say something like say, in the midst of all this depression talk, they're just like, yeah, I just feel like I'm worthless. And then I go, well, but you have so many reasons to believe that you're of a lot of worth.
Oh yeah. It just grates on the nerves.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So from the outside, that might look like, oh, well, you're being reassuring. And because, what's the difference between that and telling someone that they have worth in a different context that isn't grading? You know what I mean?
Yeah, it's invalidating. That's the problem with it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right.
Or at least one problem with it anyways.
Right. Another problem is that it's trying to leapfrog everything. It's the suggestion is that if you just reassure a client,
right,
and they choose to believe it, then their low self-esteem will just go away.
Yeah, and that works. No.
Yeah.
I'm kidding.
Yeah. All right, let's take a break. We get back. More emails. Let's do some more OPP.
Right on.
So these people are all from the U.S. So we got Gabriella from Houston, Texas, Dave from Chicago, Diana from New York, Chrissy from Peru, Massachusetts.
Wow.
Nina from Chicago, Mary from Bowling Green, Kentucky. Isn't that where they have the Kentucky Derby, Bowling Green?
Churchill Downs, I think, is what the track's called anyways.
Oh. Well, why do I know Bowling Green?
There's a college there.
Oh, okay. Yeah, that's probably what Kelly from Lititz, Pennsylvania? Lititz?
How do you spell it?
Lititz. Lititz.
I don't know that place.
Kaylee from Naples, Florida. Nata Fuhr from the Colony, Texas. I like town names that have a phrase, like Federal Way, south of Seattle.
Yeah.
It rolls off the tongue now because we hear it all the time. But when you first hear it, you're thinking, Federal Way?
It is. It's a weird name.
That sounds like a street.
Yeah.
But the Colony is apparently the name of this town in Texas. The Colony. The is in the name of the city.
Where are you from? The Colony.
Yeah.
Oh, interesting.
That's weird. Caitlin from Ann Arbor, Michigan. B123 from Merriam, Kansas. Sylvia from Richmond, California. Candace from Delco, North Carolina. Janice from Surprise, Arizona. That's always a fun sign to steal if you're in Arizona. Madison from Los Angeles, and Karen from Seattle. Thank you so much for becoming a patron and staying a patron all of this time. I mean, you're literally, no joke, paying my bills and my family's bills, which gives me the ability to answer all these emails.
Yeah.
Let's go on to another question. Patron Becca from California. She says, Kirk and Bob, I love the podcast, and you have been instrumental to my learning as an associate marriage and family therapist.
Oh, right on.
So for those who don't know, associate is post-grad, but early career. As I am just a few weeks away from taking my licensing exam,
Wow.
I wanted to know how you both approach studying for your exams and how you celebrated passing. Also, hi, Rebecca and Berto. So, how did you study?
I studied to get a C. A C was passing, so I studied enough so that I could get a C.
What did you do?
What
exactly?
a colleague of mine had a manual, had 900 questions, and I read them twice. I just read them like multiple choice questions, like, test questions.
So you just read through the manual twice?
Twice. Yeah.
Which took you how long?
I don't know, maybe a week.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
And how did you celebrate passing? We would have been friends.
Yeah.
But
that was 99. I passed my licensure in 99.
Yeah, me too.
That's 25 years.
It is.
Yeah.
Well,
how did I celebrate? We probably had beer and cards.
we went out a lot back then, so
yeah,
we probably just by default were doing it. But I don't remember doing anything specific.
No, I don't know.
I wonder if it's in my journal. I might have written about it in my journal because it was a big deal to get that letter in the mail, that snail mail letter.
Yeah,
that says you pass.
Remember they gave you a license. It was a piece of paper, but then it had a little wallet-sized. You could perforated wallet size. You could take it out and put it in your wallet. I did that for a little while. Now it's in a drawer somewhere.
I did too.
Yeah.
In fact, I remember you and I, because I don't know. This sounds really immature, but when you and I would go out, we'd go out with a lot of friends, and you're at the bars, you're at the clubs,
right.
You're at the ball game or something, and we would befriend everyone around us.
Yeah.
And you were the life of the party.
Oh, well, you.
No, you were. And I was secondary.
I don't know if that's true.
Well, we were both very social.
Very gregarious.
And very able. I remember we would walk into like even a house party or something, and everything would be subdued, and you and I would just kind of in a non-obnoxious but pretty forward way get people like talking and laughing,
engaging,
and I remember there would be times when we would pull out our you remember this?
I do.
Okay.
In the alibi room once.
Okay.
Yeah.
Is it safe for podcast to tell the story?
It's pretty generic.
Okay, I don't remember the exact.
We were just chatting with this group of folk and blah, blah, blah. What do you do? I'm a therapist. No, you're not. Like, yes, I am.
Yeah, because we were pretty jazzed about being a therapist.
Oh, yeah.
And it was...
And licensed.
Yeah, and our whole... we were certified. They didn't have license.
Yeah, I was a certified mental health counselor. That's right.
Yeah. And I was... maybe I was a certified... Really? I think they had certification. Yeah, no, they had certification in marriage and family therapy too.
I thought you were an LMFT. I thought you guys were all LMFTs from the start.
No, all of us got licensed at the Washington State switched from certification to licensure, I think that very next year, in the year 2000.
2000, yeah.
And so we were grandfathered in.
Right.
And it's interesting because my certification number is low.
Mine is too.
What's your certification number?
00004179.
4179. Mine is 0000107. It's like I'm because there are fewer marriage and family therapists.
Well, right,
but I'm like the 1,000th Washington, and they probably didn't start 00001. Like I could literally be the 79th. You know what I mean? Like you could imagine they would start at 1,000 when they have enough room to go like to 10 million or something.
Right.
I don't know that, but it's quite possible because one, marriage and family therapy is a much smaller profession than counseling, and two, the CFT program at Antioch had started the year before or the very year that I enrolled. So,
wait, it did?
Yeah, Paul had founded the program either that year or just shortly before that. When I went to graduation, there were 30 or 40 counselors at graduation, and there were 4 of the marriage and family therapists. And I remember looking at that going like, how come there are because the programs were the same size, but they hadn't had enough time to graduate people.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, so Oh, so before that, before he showed up there and started that program, it was they just trained counselors?
Mm-hmm.
That's fast. I didn't know that.
Like Paul has had and continued to have a license in counseling.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's amazing.
Yeah.
Was that certification fairly new as an availability?
I think they, from my memory, they introduced the certification process across the board for everybody.
No.
Because before that, it was just a registered
counselor. Yeah. Yeah.
which you didn't need any education for.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Background check.
So sort of an
training.
interim before licensure. I don't know. Anyway.
Right.
But I studied for my exams by hiring my professor, one of my professors, and he was in charge of doing this kind of thing. And he gave me a study guide, and he walked me through it, and I studied it, and and passed. And there were some questions. There was a whole section on EFT that I had never even heard of EFT.
Wow.
Because it just wasn't talked about much. But apparently, whoever wrote up the test, it was their thing. And I'm like, there were like 5 questions on emotionally focused therapy. And I'm like, what is this? I never even heard of it.
How'd you do on them? Do you know?
No idea.
Yeah.
I was just shooting in the dark. I'm guessing I got them all wrong, but
You only had to get a C, get a 70% to pass that thing. And I thought there's no point in getting an A on this.
it depends. I mean, I don't know about counselors, but it depends on the test, because they rotate in the tests.
Oh, really?
And the passing percentage is different for each test. And I think it's also kind of on a curve, if I'm not mistaken.
Wow.
But it's always somewhere around there, like 65 to 75%, right? And it's a multiple choice test. The vast majority of the questions are, and there's 4 options,
right?
And usually 2 of the options are ridiculous, and you're usually just debating between the final 2. And a lot of the quote unquote correct answers are stupid. So you have to study the past tests and get to know what they think is correct, not what actually is correct.
Right.
Because they'll ask like these really debatable questions, like on reassurance. There'll be a question of, so a client asks you for reassurance, what do you do?
Right.
A, you give them reassurance. B, you don't give them reassurance. C, you talk about whether or not they want reassurance. And you're like, it depends.
Yeah. Right.
But there's a right answer. Like, I'm not even joking. These are the questions. And
man,
the impression I get is that people who know what they're talking about have better things to do than to revamp this test every year, because they have to continually add new questions. Because if you stick with the same test, people memorize them, and it's too easy to cheat.
Mostly it's outdated too.
Right. And so you have these people, in my mind, must not know what they're talking about, and they're the only people that they can get, because it's the government paying for this service, and they're probably not paying very much.
No.
Yeah, it's pretty aggravating. Plus, like, what's a discrete always in our industry? I mean, how many things, like when you're testing for medicine, right? You have these symptoms. What's the most likely thing? Then that's much easier to test on. But like clinical questions, it really just depends. So a lot of the questions end up being memorization. Like,
that's what I did.
What were Freud's 5 stages of psychosexual behavior, or whatever.
Right.
And that has, and we've studied this, it has no indication as to the competence of your ability as a therapist.
No.
It's just a hoop you have to jump through.
Right.
All right, this next email is from highest tier patron and YouTube member, Kimmy from Utah. Again, she says, "Hi, Kirk and Bob." And by the way, everybody, if you want your email to get prioritized, if you can become the highest tier patrons, that's because there's so many emails, I have to somehow limit it, and that's kind of what we do sometimes. So just a little tip there. But going on with the email, I recently got my CS-UDC license to treat substance use for my state. I was working in inpatient treatment, but now I'm working in outpatient. With my inpatient clients, I was able to go over required CBT homework with them, or specific paperwork required by the agency that made our sessions feel as if there was always a goal. So she's saying with inpatient, I felt like there was always a goal. because we could go over all this stuff. With these outpatient clients, they come in and some of them say, fix me, and sit there and wait for me to speak. Others have legal issues that make it a requirement to have therapy. I want to help, but many of my clients have the idea that they have learned it already. Like they might have been to many treatments before, and they might just wait out the clock. When I ask them what goals they have or what they would like out of therapy, I typically get the answer of, I don't know. How would you advise a new therapist in a situation like this? I am open to advice and suggestions or reading material. Bob, what do you think?
Well, you do have the possibility of remaining curious. They're there. I don't like working. I haven't had much experience with, and not interested in working with folks that are court-ordered, because I just feel like that does not work, man. There's two agendas. Actually, there may only be one agenda, the one that has to do with getting the legal system off your back. So, in my opinion, not a useful endeavor most of the time. Though I'm probably wrong about some percentage of folks who, would make good use of that. But that's not something I really want to learn about or pursue. With your clients that, you have that sense that they want you to fix them, you could just be interested and curious about them. Like, tell me more. What's broken? What brought you here? Like, what led you to picking up the phone and calling, if that's what you did, or seeking out, counseling or whatever it is, and just stay curious and interested, and perhaps it's useful to keep in mind that you're not there to supply motivation, and that people get to be whoever they are, and they get to be where they are, and you're just a therapist. You can only do what you can do, and if you have someone that has limited or no motivation, I think just holding up a mirror about that, and don't be a dick about it. I mean, no need saying, well, you don't want anything, blah, blah. But just like you don't look motivated. Maybe I'm wrong, but you don't look like you have much drive from inside. Is that right? And can we learn about that? Just keep learning.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah. There's so much to say.
Yeah.
I'll try to be as brief as possible. One, my first reaction is, this is it's possibly an impossible situation for you, and I'm guessing you feel responsible to try to get them to talk or something, but
right.
It's not your responsibility. And to be honest, when I get clients like this, my current career, within 2 minutes, I'm talking about getting them out of my office because I have better shit to do.
Yeah.
And I don't appreciate being, having clients foisted on me. I value my time too much. So you're in a very difficult spot, and I'm going to take a guess and say that this is not the end career position for your life.
Probably not.
If it pays well enough and it's giving you some experience, I would just stick it out and be currently looking for another position somewhere. Because if this is the kind of clientele that they're giving you or attracting, it's not a fun job. It will grind you to a pulp, and you'll hate everything about it.
Yeah.
The other thing is that some court-ordered people will use therapy well. Two scenarios come to mind, but there's a lot. One is, I had a client at the beginning of my career who was court-ordered, and he had been caught shoplifting from his employment, from his employer, and as a part of his sentence was sentenced to therapy. And the motivation for him was that I was going to report to the courts, his probation officer or whatever, his meaningful use of therapy or not. I wasn't going to report what he said or anything like that, but there was a lever there. Plus, he kind of wanted to know why he compulsively did this.
Oh.
And it was a part of a bigger pattern.
Yeah.
And so as long as I played ball, he eventually came to therapy meaningfully. Another situation is, every single intimate partner violence perpetrator, domestic violence perpetrator that was court ordered to come into therapy with this, mandated group. There's a DV group, and I was the therapist that was there in the room to provide the therapy angle.
Yeah.
And none of them wanted to be there. They all hated being there. They all thought it was stupid, and they all had their excuses. Abusers will do that. And yet 99% of them would turn around after 6 months. And it's complicated, But again, we had leverage because if they didn't do meaningful work, then they would do prison time. Because coming to the treatment was a less. It's like, well, we want to give you prison time, but if you agree to go to this treatment group, then you won't get prison time. So there's that. But also, the other group members would confront, because there'd be more advanced group members that would say, I was like you too, and just do the work. And sometimes you can get people to just do certain activities that are easy to do, like let's review automatic thoughts or something, But if they don't want to do that, then I would either just shoot the shit, watch YouTube with them, play a game, or I would just. I've had sessions in the beginning of my career when I didn't have the power to say no to this, where I literally just would grab a book off the shelf and read it because the client was refusing to interact with me at all. And it was extremely uncomfortable, and I didn't like it, but I didn't have any choice. And I did everything I could to engage with the client, and they just refused to participate. So, that's what I'll say about that. I would also potentially talk to your supervisor and say, what's going on? Do you have any tips? I'd also talk to whoever's giving you the clients and say, stop giving me these these difficult clients, because there's a chance that whoever is funneling the clients to you is screwing you over, because the more experienced clinicians have leverage or rapport with that individual and are saying to that person, stop giving me these impossible people, because the intake person will know if the person is up for therapy, or at least susceptible to it. And I have a hard time believing that every single client that comes into your agency is like this. So there's a chance that you're just getting screwed over. Let's read another email. All right, this next email is from middle tier patron and YouTube member Hannah from Indiana. Good old Hannah from Indiana. She says, Kirkenbog, I've been in therapy for 8 years for depression, anxiety, and chronic suicidal ideation. I also have a diagnosis of PTSD, OCD, and BPD. My chronic suicidal ideation started at the age of 9 and has persisted with daily suicidal thoughts. I'm 26 years old now. At the beginning of the year, I attempted suicide and spent 3 weeks in inpatient treatment, followed by 2 months in residential treatment. So at the beginning of the year, I think 2023, I attempted suicide and spent 3 weeks in inpatient treatment, followed by 2 months of residential treatment. I think meaning day treatment. Wasn't that what you would think that means?
I don't know. Maybe something.
Because there's inpatient,
right?
And then I guess it could have been another another inpatient facility that is not like a hospital.
Yeah.
The residential treatment program was DBT focused, and I felt like I started to make some progress. Oh. I feel like that progress started to happen because I didn't have any other distractions from treatment, like work, relationships, and finances. So residential treatment must have been also generally inpatient, but maybe like a more like in a not a hospital setting.
Right.
Since being released from residential, I've been in weekly therapy and medication management. However, the chronic suicidal ideation has persisted. I believe that a lot of the suicidal ideation stems from childhood sexual abuse. I don't feel like making significant progress is possible in an outpatient setting with weekly therapy appointments while working full-time. What do you think is the best way to recover from chronic suicidal ideation and sexual abuse trauma? Just chiming in here, Bob, what do you think?
Well, we should definitely take those one at a time. When you say recovering from chronic suicide ideation, I think what you're saying is you want it to stop. If that's true, then maybe what a person would do is start looking at what are the things that bring it out. Like, Is there a particular time of day that it happens to show up? Is there some kind of event that seems to, or probably more than one, that seems to bring it into motion? And are those at all resolvable? Like, let's see if I could think of an example. Okay. Let's say I'm driving down the road and I pass this particular part of town, and this is a part where, has some bad memories for me. And I find myself thinking about suicide, which, for lots of folks, suicide is an escape hatch. It's sort of like, well, I can always do that. I can always just do that. Anyways, you might consider not driving down that part of the world, or you might consider, I'm not going to tell you what to do. What I'm going to suggest to you, you should do in a very planful way with your therapist. But you can expose to the place if or the cue or the trigger or whatever. And if you do it enough times, you can habituate to it in such that you don't have the need to escape it anymore. You could consider, what are the emotions that come up right as suicidation or right before suicidal thinking come online. Because I've met many people that are just emotion phobic, that their emotions actually scare the shit out of them. And so, one of the ways to escape is to, take the ultimate escape. Though nobody knows if it helps. Let's be real. It's not a viable option, and nobody knows if it helps. So don't do it. But you want it to go away. So you might consider, well, what emotional, what is it? Is it like the feeling of pressure in my chest, or that awful catch in my stomach, or whatever body sensation might be linked to the suicide? Or you might consider, what are the consequences of me having this suicidation? Like, for instance, if I have it and then I tell my sister about it, they're really sympathetic. And it could be that I'm getting inadvertent operant conditional reinforcement for having the thing, though hold that one loosely. And, sometimes that's the case, but sometimes it isn't. And so there's that. But basically, what's it for? Like, what's its function? When my brain goes there, what's it trying to do, and sort of work with that? And how can I recover from, what was it?
Childhood sexual abuse?
Well, not really my field, but as I understand it, exposure therapy is a really good way to help with the PTSD symptoms of childhood sexual abuse. It isn't that a person can be relieved of the anxiety, and the anxiety is probably too small a word, the terror that comes from the cues of memory. Though I guess one of the questions that goes through my head is, well, how is it showing up in your life now? And DBT could be a really good option to help you with managing the ways in which it shows up. If it makes you afraid when you're walking down the street, like somebody's approaching, and that somehow sets your body into motion. There's ways to handle that. I'm thinking of somebody that we know that was in a DBT class that I taught a long time ago, where they were combining DBT plus exposure therapy. And what the person said was just, it's amazing. What she said was, I can no longer live a meaningful life and avoid these things that I'm avoiding. And what they used to avoid is men. So walking down the street, if there was a man coming, they'd cross the street. If they were at the bus stop and a man showed up, they'd walk down the street to the next bus stop, which can get kind of expensive because you miss your bus. And they said, I can no longer live this way and have a meaningful life. So I'm going to live an exposed life. An exposed life is, most people on the street are not dangerous. Now, should they walk down a dark alley in the middle of the night? No. But if you're on a city street in the middle of the daytime in a reasonably safe part of town, and you happen to be walking past someone who, their presence just sets the PTSD stuff, the anxiety stuff in motion, then they're probably not dangerous. So, probably not. They're most likely, most people are not dangerous. Most people are not going to hurt us. So, don't cross the street. That's what they did. They didn't cross the street. They didn't walk away from the bus stop. They just stayed. And at first they were scared to death, and they just were willing to keep at it. And it subsided. I think it took a matter of maybe weeks to maybe a couple, 3 months for it to settle enough. I don't know if they didn't experience it at all, but I think it became manageable to them. And so the way in which they were plagued by the abuses they suffered was mitigated because it wasn't intruding on their life in the way that it was, in the way it had been before they started that particular therapy program. So I don't know. I'm kind of be interested in what Kirk has to say about this. There's probably more I could say, but off the top of my head, that's what comes in.
Yeah, it's good. The only thing I'll add is I think what you're drawing a connection, Hannah from Indiana, is that one, when you're in residential treatment, it's a very different emotional milieu. One, you don't have the distractions, but also you have this constant presence of humans. And that could have been the protective factor in your suicidal ideation. The other difference is that you were doing intensive DBT, maybe every day.
Yeah.
And I don't hear that you're doing DBT in your outpatient weekly therapy appointments. You could, for example, add a DBT group to your weekly therapy, and that could be in the direction of not only having DBT, but also having more contact and regularity with people that you trust.
Right.
So there's that. Also, if you, of course, had safe relationships in your personal life, then that would be even better.
Yeah.
I didn't hear that. You didn't comment on that, but I imagine that that is a pretty big part of it. The other thing is that when, there's two general types of suicidal ideation that I've experienced clinically. One is that people have ups and downs. The other one is that it's just chronic. And it's almost like the neurons become habitually firing. And especially since you've been thinking about it since you were 9, it's like, it's analogous for me in that there's this one memory I have of being on vacation with my friends when I was about 30 years old at Lake Chelan, and I'm sitting at this table in a restaurant and I'm looking down at this candle, and it's completely innocuous moment. Nothing happened that moment, but for whatever reason, that little scene will just pop into my head. And I've investigated. There's nothing psychoanalytic about it. It's just I had that memory and I recalled it soon after, and my brain just decided this is going to be something that I'm, and the more I remember it, the more it's remembered. And so it's similar to this, what fires together, wires together. Yeah. And so it's just a habit, a chronic habit of your unconscious mind. And as Bob was saying, it in all likelihood points to something, whether it's avoidance of emotion or some particular emotion. And it isn't like there's a healthy end result of all your work that might actually include occasional thoughts of suicide that pop into your head. And you just regard it as, well, it's not actual motivation or an indication that that's a path, but what is it telling me? Usually when I have that thought pop into my head, it's because of some feeling that I'm having, or some fear, or some disconnection, or some low self-esteem, or something. And now I have a direction to go in terms of what do I do because of that. Just trying not to think about something is not very easy, right? Don't think about a pink elephant. Don't think about a pink elephant. And it creates a lot of distress. So there's that. Plus, PTSD, OCD, borderline, there's a lot to work on. Yeah. And it's going to take a long time. And it's great. You're at a phase of your treatment. You went to inpatient, you went to residential treatment, you've done tremendous work. You have a pretty good foundation. Mm-hmm. And it's expected that when you go back to your regular life that a lot of the feelings are going to reemerge. So now the task is, now that I have this under my belt and I'm back in the thick of my life, what do I do differently this time? And you're in weekly therapy, I'm guessing 1 hour a week. That would be the first thing I would attack, is adding a DBT group. You could also ask your therapist to go twice a week. Mm-hmm. that would not be uncommon, especially if you have ongoing suicidal ideation, especially if you have borderline. Now, that's the childhood sexual abuse trauma. I would address that later, because the thing that you're doing now seems to be emotional awareness and regulation. That will help you in exposure therapy down the line anyway.
Yeah.
So there's that. Plus, you don't want to go headlong into that recovery while you're still actively at risk of suicide. That is like,
Oh, yeah.
Recovery 101, really.
Yeah.
So
That has to be off the table.
yeah. And you can consider, if available, occasional returns to residential treatment if your insurance will pay for it or whatever, or something akin to that, like relatives or, I don't know, a break, something. You might consider that as part of the plan moving forward. The notion that somehow you're just going to slot into the capitalistic society of working 50 weeks out of the year and getting 2 weeks off and doing all your chores and responsibilities outside of that is unrealistic for most people, maybe everybody, let alone someone going through what you're going through. So, maybe there's some other manageable plan. I don't know. In a perfect world, we'd have taxes raised and spent so that you could take a break off work for a few years and just go to residential treatment that whole time. Or at the very least, have a much more robust treatment program, perhaps every day, in outpatient, and you don't have to pay for it. But the way economics are right now, the way insurance companies are, but typically they will authorize, well, I don't know, depends on where you're at, depends on the insurance you have, but I would give it a more than 50% chance that you can get 2 sessions a week and have it be paid for. If that's not the case, then you can ask your therapist to reduce the fee, perhaps.
Yeah.
You can also supplement the therapy with a more affordable situation or something. I don't know, but hang in there, and you're at the beginning, and you're doing great, and all of this is normal, and just keep working on it. And the idea is that you go down the road of recovery, and 5 years from now, you'll still have issues, but it'll be a lot more manageable. And 5 years later, same, and you just keep going down.
Chip away. Don't kill yourself. Do not kill yourself.
Yeah. And that does it for that episode of Psychology in Seattle. Everyone out there, please take care of yourself, truly, because
you deserve it.